welcome to the Money Control live stream. I'm Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor. Now we are back to bring in another mini masterclass right here for you. So Dinesh and I are back. Let me welcome Dinesh to the stream as well. Hi Dinesh, how are you doing? Dinesh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Sonal. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me to the show. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm very well. I always look forward to my conversations with you, Dinesh, because they teach me, and I'm hoping in our viewers also so much in the process. And our mini masterclass has been getting quite popular. So many people writing to us to say that, oh, this is such a great idea. Let's do more of this. So I thought, why not touch upon another topic which dominated all newspapers today. So in US, we know Wednesday is a big day. That's when we'll get to know about what happens next in terms of prices, in terms of what will be decided in the policy as well. But in the run-up to that, one word that really caught my attention this morning, Dinesh, was this word called stagflation. Yes. Not inflation, not stagnation, but stagflation. It's a very Gen Z hashtag sort of a word that everybody's talking about. And that really got me curious. Okay, so what exactly is this? And what got me even more interested is that while recession in US, many saying seems to be now almost a reality, something that we will see happen in the near future. India is far away from recession. That's not a worry for us. But many economists and several people who've been watching this space quite closely talk about how stagflation is a reality for India in the times to come. So because there's an India angle, because the impact that will happen on your and my household budget, how you and I spend, how you and I plan our New Year holidays, how you and I plan our spends as well. So I thought, let's understand this a little bit in detail. So can you first simply explain to us what stagflation means?
Yes, Sonal, excellent choice for the discussion today. Stagflation is not very well discussed in Indian context, although we keep seeing this term every once in a while and has become a fancy term. But unfortunately, this is something that hits the poorest of the economy so bad, this combination. I will explain to you. First, let me give you a brief background about how this term origin. This actually, the term stagflation was used in Britain by a British politician, Ian MacLeod, in 1965 during a debate in the British Parliament. That was a time when Britain was facing the prospects of high inflation plus low growth, which exactly is the meaning of this word. If you look at the word stagflation, if you can break it up easily, stagnant growth plus high inflation. So that is stagflation, stagnant growth and high inflation. Now, it's not as simple as this. Stagflation is typically a period, a phase that is also accompanied by high unemployment. So you have all the bad things, unfortunately, coming together. You have stagnant growth or low growth. You have high inflation, and then you have high rate of unemployment. So what happens is, we are all familiar with low growth. All of us know what happens when an economy doesn't grow much in the desired manner. Because when the growth slows, the economy slows, the businesses suffer, jobs go away, and the poorest of the segments, they suffer badly. Like that, high inflation. High inflation is something where the prices of goods and services go up significantly. So inflation itself is bad. Slow growth itself is bad. Then you have the third component, which is the unemployment, where a significant number in the workforce doesn't have the avenues for employment. So this, at a point when stagflation arises, all three factors come together. You have stagnant or low growth, you have high inflation, and you have high unemployment. So to put it simple, what happens is that in an economy which doesn't grow in a desired manner, where the prices of goods and services are too high, unemployment also rise sharply. So suppose a person doesn't have the income uh, the way he should have, and when the economy also grows, very
Got it.
slow, when the
Got it.
prices are very high, then
Yeah.
this situation comes, which we call stagflation.
Yeah. It's actually the worst of both worlds, right?
It's
And this is
worst.
why.
It's worst of all worlds. If I can put it that way, because that is the trickiest part. That is the trickiest part, and there is no immediate solution when an economy plunges into stagflation. It normally takes years and sometimes decades, to come out of stagflation. I must say that in 70s, India too faced some aspects of stagflation when the average inflation consistently stood higher than the average growth and unemployment rose sharply. So we have gone through that part. Uh, I take the point from your introduction where you mentioned about the US. So US stagflation seems to be a pretty much close reality at this point because
I
the inflation has grown. I think the August numbers about 8% as 1 year high. The growth it's on the verge of recession, and pretty much the Fed is gearing up for another round of rate hikes. So the US may be very close to a recession point. That's how the debate came up this time, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I understand. So, in fact, one of the reasons now I'm understanding why so many people have written how stagflation is much worse than inflation. Stagflation is much worse than recession. It's actually a
Yes.
combination of all of these things. And that's why you rightly pointed out once a country enters into stagflation, it takes a years and years actually to come back to it.
Yes.
But I just
Absolutely.
want to understand, at this point, we are seeing stagflation is almost a reality in not just US, UK reporting it, South
Yes.
Africa, there are murmurs emerging as well. But I want to keep global cues aside for a minute, right? At Money Control, here our audiences want to know India के लिए
Yes.
कितना, right?
Yes.
हमें हमें
Yes.
कब bother करने वाला है? That's what our audiences want to know. So I want to understand
Yes.
when our numbers are looking pretty good, our GDP figures compared to the world is pretty good. The finance minister, in fact, mentioned the word stagflation not very long ago. I think it was a previous quarter in Parliament saying that we don't need to worry about it. So why are you saying that there is a real threat of stagnation in India?
Well, the GDP numbers, for FY22 looks good, but the reality is that those numbers doesn't really depict the reality, real picture, Sonal, because the 8.7 FY22 number has come on the back of contraction of 6.6% in the previous fiscal. So if you look at the base effect, the real growth has been very, very far away from our real potential. We are not in recession at this point. We are growing, the point taken, but the actual growth is just, I think we must have just gone back to the pre-pandemic levels. But this we are nowhere growing at 8.7% because the number itself is a trick of statistics. That's because it has the 8.7 growth has come over 6.6% contraction in the previous fiscal. So
I,
we at this point we are growing, but if the inflation, which all of us know, the Indian retail inflation is way high, and the MPC is on the verge of explaining to the government about its failure, consistently above 7%. If the inflation continues at very high level for a prolonged period, if the RBI fails to bring the inflation back to the below 5% level at least early next fiscal, and if growth fails to pick up, so let me not complicate this thing to our readers. What I'm saying is that if our inflation continues very high, and if the growth doesn't pick up in the desired manner, and the mind you, the unemployment rate is also very high. We just had 8% unemployment in August, which is I think 1 year high in India. So all these factors suggest that India too may face the prospects of a stagflation, maybe by the end of next fiscal, if things don't improve substantially.
So you're saying India at the moment, don't look at numbers in isolation, don't look at
No.
GDP in isolation. Look at
Yeah.
it as stagnant growth and rising
Yes.
inflation. And
Yes.
the marriage of the two leads to stagnation, to
Yes.
stagflation. And that is a
Stagflation.
worrying trend. That's what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
I
So
get that.
so so
So
so the 8.7% growth, we are nowhere on a high growth path yet. Although everyone, the politicians, the some part of the media and the industry would like to believe we are not actually growing. We are growing at a very slow pace. 8.7% is above the 6.6% contraction seen in the last fiscal, and our inflation is unacceptably too high, which is what the problem is. That there is a real risk of stagflation for in India. Let me tell you, in my view, and I'm happy to be proved wrong. That is, if the RBI get hold of the inflation back to the desired levels, and if growth picks up substantially, then this prognosis can go wrong. But at this point, we are running the risk of stagflation for sure
yeah.
for
So
next
I
year.
just break it down the concept of stagflation, uh, sort of Dinesh, for the common man, right?
Yeah.
We talked about stagnant growth and increase in inflation, right? For the common man, for my household budget, it basically means that my salary is not going up, inflation is rising, and there
Yes.
are lesser and lesser chances of,
Yes.
I'm hearing of unemployment really being on the rise. That
Yes.
basically saying that it's becoming difficult to sustain at the current levels for me. That is essentially taxation, right? Now,
Yes.
this is generally the time where I was reading up somewhere very interestingly that labor disruptions happen in a situation of stagflation, right?
Yeah.
Because and how, I mean, I don't want to go to the process of understanding how the RBI is going to course correct this. How are they planning to sort of do all of that? That's a bit complicated. I'm sure you have an easy way to explain that. But just to sort of understand why labor disruptions are so associated with stagflation.
Look, again, let me go back to the fundamental point, Sonal. So the issue is that stagflation impacts the affordability of everything in an economy.
Yeah.
There is no simpler way to
Affordability is
put
the,
it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it impacts the affordability of everything. And there is no real cure for stagflation. You talked about labor disruption. I'm telling you that this can have disruptions across everywhere or all aspects of life. That is because there is no real cure, immediate cure, either from the Reserve Bank of India or from the government to correct a state of stagflation too soon. Let me tell you why. We already said that stagflation is characterized by high inflation, low growth, and high unemployment. Now, if the government and the RBI puts more money, more cash in the hands of businesses and the individuals like you and me, then what will happen is that in a high inflation scenario, we will use that money to cover up our costs. Obviously, we need to purchase the essential items, the goods and the commodities and the services. So the public will use that extra cash to to meet that, to cover, to compensate for that inflation, higher prices. It doesn't really go into any productive activity in the economy. It doesn't go into any asset creation, because when the households doesn't have enough money to buy food, buy protein items, or buy basic necessities, clothing, and renting of houses, etc., where will they go and invest that money into any asset creation? They will use that extra cash to cover up the cost. Now, if that is now on the other hand, if the RBI is going to make money more costlier by keep hiking interest rates, then there is already a pain of high inflation. Now,
Yeah. There's
if you
more
make the
demand,
money,
more, yeah, yeah, yeah.
there is no demand. So if you curb the demand by hiking the rates again, then the pain of affordability that will get hurt even worse. So I'm saying, this can impact the below average economic segment in a very bad way, because already they are paying very high prices for everything, and
Yeah.
if the growth doesn't pick up, that means most companies will shed their extra employees. They will go for layoffs. In a way, we are already seeing that, isn't it? We are seeing even the big IT corporations or consumer-oriented businesses already laying off people. So that, in a way, that workforce is already suffering. So the only way is that, uh, you know to ensure that we are not plunging into a state of stagflation, and get hold of your inflation as soon as possible, and invest in product, boost private investment so that businesses can generate
Yeah.
activity and economy can
So
pick
you
up.
are saying, since it is a problem at two ends, which is of
Yes,
growth and inflation, it has to be
yes,
tackled at both ends by the government. So one way could be
yes,
reducing. I was reading up in UK how they tackled it last time around. So the government had to
yes,
substantially go off taxes so that there is a boost in growth in economy at least. And once
yes.
that let go, it eased out businesses a little, layoffs were lesser seen, etc. And at the same time, they had to also provide for the common man and give them subsidies, etc. So this requires a lot of strategic thinking and a lot of. It's not a simple problem to solve, Dinesh.
So I hope we don't end up in that situation, Sonal.
Yeah.
Honestly, all of us keep
But
writing about economy.
how realistically do you think India uh, is sort of a way, or how realistically do you think we could be entering a stagflation phase?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, Sonal? Could you repeat?
I'm trying to understand how realistic is stagflation for India.
So stagflation will happen in India by end of next fiscal if inflation remains uncontrollably high, and if growth doesn't pick up the way it should. Because we what the growth, the GDP numbers we saw last fiscal is on a low base. That is not nowhere, we are nowhere near our actual potential. So stagflation looks to be a very realistic aspect to my mind, at least by end of next fiscal, if there is no effective way to control inflation and if growth doesn't pick up. And I would think that unemployment is a product of uh, lack of economic growth. High unemployment happens when the economy doesn't grow substantially. Like I just said, companies are letting go of their employees because there is not enough demand, there is not enough business, there is not enough growth. So stagflation is a vicious cycle where you will have a problem from both sides, where the policy makers will find it
Yeah.
extremely tough to act, because if you attack high inflation by hiking interest rates, it will pain the general public who are already facing effects of low growth and high inflation. You cannot put more cash into the system that
Got
will add to inflation. It might not go to the productive activities. So it looks pretty real, and
Yeah.
unless there are
So you're
surprises.
just bringing down, yeah, you're saying just bringing down sort of interest rates won't help. Just doing that will not help.
We
Just
cannot bring
controlling
down
at.
No, we cannot bring down interest rates at this point, because of the obvious reasons. Because inflation is extremely high, isn't it, Sona? So I know it sounds complicated, but that's how it is. That you cannot hike interest rates, bring down interest rates when inflation is already high. Unfortunately, the policy makers, the Reserve Bank of India, has only one powerful tool to control inflation. That is high interest rates. They can either use interest rates or tighten liquidity to control inflation. There is no other way. So RBI definitely will have to hike interest rates because inflation is high. The tricky part is that are we growing, or are we getting back to the path of high growth on the other side, the way we should, in the desired manner? That is also very critical to watch.
Wow. Okay. So end of next fiscal is what Dinesh is saying. Audiences, you can please note that down and write to us if you think that's happening, not happening. We'll hold Dinesh to that on how
No,
it happens.
that is the general view. It's just not my personal opinion. That is, see, because if inflation is not, the RBI expects inflation below 5% by the first quarter of next fiscal. We discussed this in the last, I think, the last session. If that doesn't happen for some reason, and that's pretty much, very lucid situation at this point, because much of the inflation is imported from external factors. You have a war in Russia, and you have high commodity prices, very unstable. So if those things improve and if the domestic inflation cools down, then there is a possibility that things may not become worse from this point, and happy to be proved wrong that we don't end up in a field of stagflation. Yeah.
Got it. So what I'm hearing from you, Dinesh, is just to sort of wrap up this broadcast right now. It is that India is treading very carefully at as of this moment. We have to watch out for. We might not be at the stage where US and UK are already, where you're saying they're almost into a state of recession or stagflation. India is not there yet, but the next couple of quarters are going to be very crucial. And the finance minister of India, I mean, anybody watching out for the situation unfolding in India will be watching this space of inflation rates and growth rates very, very carefully to avoid the situation at all cost, right? That's where we are at this point. And for the common man, I think the only takeaway over here is the fact that, I don't know, if you are somebody watching out for this situation, Dinesh, what does one do?
Sorry, was there a question?
Yeah, I was trying to understand how does one prepare for stagflation?
Well, I think the easiest answer to that is that uh, have savings. Try to avoid debt. Well, I'm not a personal finance advisor, but this is how one should act. You should keep your savings for the rainy days. You should avoid debt as much as possible, unless it is really necessary. Don't get into unnecessary, non-productive spending. All those extra consumption spendings can take a backseat, probably because the employment scenario is also very unsustainable at this point. That's how we can look forward.
With the festive season coming in, Dinesh, this is not sounding good at all. But we leave it for people to sort of go back to their financial advisors and prepare for all of this. This has been an interesting, fascinating discussion on stagflation. Thanks so much, Dinesh, for giving us your time. And again, as always, making us understand in very simple terms kya ho raha hai in the economy, to understand very simply stagflation hota kya hai, US mein kyo ho raha hai, UK mein kab hua, and very interestingly how you talked about how it was first discovered back in 1965, you said, in the UK Parliament, and how so many decades later it is about to be a reality very, very soon. That's it from us, from Dinesh and I. Thank you all for joining on this broadcast. If you have more questions, you want more gyan coming from Dinesh, just write to us. We'll keep getting him on to decode all these that sound complicated situations, but easily on how it will impact you and me. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.